Remember when you know who kept campaigning on this promise?
We're getting out of the nation-building business.
We must abandon the failed policy of nation-building and regime change.
Our current strategy of nation-building and regime change is a proven absolute failure.
So remember all of that. Well, now America and the world have a lot of questions after the U.S. captured Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro and his wife, Celia, who are about to appear in a courtroom right here in New York. And the administration can't seem to get the story straight about their plans in and out of Venezuela. Take a look.
We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition.
Is the United States running Venezuela right now?
What we are running is the direction that this is going to move moving forward, and that is we have leverage. This leverage we are using, and we intend to use.
Don't ask me who's in charge, because I'll give you an answer, and it'll be very controversial.
What does that mean?
Because we're in charge. Colombia is very sick, too, run by a sick man.
So there will be an operation by the U.S.
It sounds good to me. We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security. Cuba looks like it's ready to fall. I don't know if they're going to hold out.
Are you considering U.S. action in Cuba?
We're not. I think it's just going to fall. I don't think we need any action. It looks like it's going down. It's going down for the count.
So while perhaps no one is going to miss a tyrant like Maduro, is this a legal thing? I mean, who voted for this? Who said, hey, yeah, go on in there and do this? Because originally, wasn't it, he was concerned about the drugs coming in and out, and yet he pardoned like a giant kingpin. And so what is this all about?
I can speak to the legal part of it. I think Anna can certainly speak to the geopolitics of it all, but it's not legal to do this.
Tell people why not.
Well, it's not legal because it violates international law, right? And this sort of represents this new, I mean, I've never seen it before, for the President of the United States to kill, I believe he killed over, the U.S. government killed over 100 people, including civilians and military, in Venezuela during this kidnapping and capture. And international law doesn't allow it unless unless Congress declares war, and Congress did not do that. So this country was founded on the premise of the balance of power, right? So you have checks and balances. So you have co-equal powers co-equal branches of power. So you have the judicial branch, and then you have the executive branch, which the president is a part of, and then you have, of course, the legislative branch, and that's Congress. And they're supposed to check each other. This president is doing whatever the heck he wants without any checks or balances. And I have never in my lifetime seen this type of regime change, which is what we just saw, work out well for the United States. It just doesn't work. And in my view, this is completely 100% illegal.
Well, so I do think, oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Look, I don't think this is at all about the Venezuelan people. Donald Trump doesn't give a damn about the Venezuelan people. If he did, he wouldn't be taking away temporary protective status from 600,000. He wouldn't be arresting the Venezuelans that are seeking asylum here. He wouldn't be maligning the entire community and sending hundreds of Venezuelans to a hellhole prison in El Salvador. I don't think Donald Trump gives a damn about drugs. If he did, he would not have pardoned the former president of Honduras, who was serving 45 years in federal prison for having brought 400 tons of cocaine into the United States. I think this is a lot about Donald Trump's ego. I think he thought it was going to be easier to get rid of Maduro. I don't know that he thought it was going to take 4.5 months and 1/4 of the Navy arsenal and a cost of over $1 billion to do this. I don't think this is regime change because the regime is still there. He got rid of the head. He got rid of the titular head, which is Maduro, and it's the biggest trophy there is. But
the
all
vice
of
president is still there.
And the vice
president is now president.
Well,
And
I refuse
arguably
to
worse,
call her
or as
either
bad.
because, you see, Maduro, so the U.S. government, under Biden and under Trump, have said they don't recognize Maduro as the legitimate president of the United States because he stole the elections.
Right.
And so if we don't recognize him as president, how in the hell can then we turn around and recognize his vice president as vice president and now interim president?
Do you
and
think
as
it's
to
about
your
the oil?
question, I think it's about the oil. Your question, who voted for this? The people in South Florida. The Venezuelan community, the Cuban American community, the Nicaraguan American community voted for this. And for us, this is a very, very happy day when we see a dictator who has been part of oppressing and abusing the Venezuelan people for 25 years, when we see him in handcuffs and held to some sort of accountability. It brought me into tears. It brought me great joy. And, you know, I live in South Florida.
But are you okay with the way that it was done?
But you can, I think both things can be true.
Okay.
I think you can criticize and ask questions and have concerns about the way it was done and what this means in the future.
Right.
And I think you can still celebrate that this murderous, corrupt, sadistic son of a bitch is out of Venezuela. Because I mean, he has, I think there's 8 million Venezuelan exiles all over the world. People have fled from this man's tyrannical rule. So for me, I am very disturbed by Donald Trump's words about the opposition leader who legitimately won the elections that Maduro stole. He said that her party, won the election. She said she, Maria Corina Machado, has no respect or support of the Venezuelan people. She won the elections against this dictator by 70% of the vote.
This is important. I think that's very well said. Two things can be true at once. I am celebrating that Nicolás Maduro is out of power. This is a man who has starved, impoverished, jailed his opponents. He is a bad man and a dictator. But I have two key things that stand out to me. The lack of congressional authority is incredibly important. There's a long history in this country, to be clear, Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, where we've had very fragile congressional authority to go in. But what I care about is what happens tomorrow, because I saw the news, and like Anna, I was celebrating. I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't know if I would see the day that Maduro's out of power. But the obvious solution here would be the opposition leader, Machado, who has 70% approval and got 70% of the vote.
And won a Nobel Prize, correct?
Actually, the stand-in candidate who was in for her actually got 70% of the vote, won a Nobel Peace Prize. This is the person who should stand elections, and the U.S.'s only role should be facilitating to make sure that they're free and that they're fair and that there's not intimidation for people, the Venezuelans trying to cast their votes. What scared me is it seems like there's this rallying behind the vice president, Rodriguez, who, as far as I'm concerned, is as bad as Maduro. Having her in power would be a continuation of the same regime. So the U.S., again, diplomacy now. Let the Venezuelan people vote for a free, safe, and fair Venezuela, have democratic elections, and move on.
Can I ask you this, though? Because the thing that's interesting to me is Venezuela, I don't think a lot of people know, owns 20% of the world's oil, more than Saudi Arabia. And Trump, for months, we've been saying at this table, this is about the oil. But for months, Trump was saying, this is about narco-terrorism. This is about drugs being brought to this country. When you look at the indictment, it's about drugs being brought to this country.
It's not about
isn't
drugs.
anyone concerned about the fact that what we're doing is almost piracy? It's like imperialism. We're going to another country and we're taking their natural resources for ourselves. And on top of it, if we can do something like this, who's to say that Vladimir Putin then doesn't go to Ukraine and arrest Zelensky? Who's to say that...
Well, maybe the other could happen, because we're talking about the democratic nations of Ukraine versus
But who's
Putin.
to say China won't
maybe
go
Trump
and
should
then
go for
take
Putin, if we're being
Taiwan
honest.
over?
It's the dictators are the problem, but I think...
But would you be okay with that?
What I'm saying is,
I
again...
would be okay with taking out Putin.
I would be okay with taking out Putin, absolutely. But right now, I think the problem is, why leave part of the regime in control? Because you're leaving his vice president and all the people that were an extension of his dictatorship, the people that punished and led with the corruption and all the other problems he did, and you're saying, we're in control, but we kind of left them in charge, and there are also already warrants out for some of them. So you're leaving part of them there, but you're saying, we're in control. What could happen here is every time we leave a country, there's a power vacuum.
Yeah.
And who comes next in this?
I know people that today are still political prisoners in Venezuela. And so my question is, if the U.S. is running the Venezuelan government, if the U.S. is running the policy, if they are telling Maduro's minions what to do, why in the hell are there still political prisoners being held in Venezuela today?
Because it's... Go ahead.
Can I add real quick? The Venezuelan people are very, very confident holding elections even under unsafe environments. I met Juan Guaido, the former opposition leader. They turned out in droves, tens of millions of people to support him, despite the fact they could have been jailed, they could have been imprisoned. They know how to show up for their rights. They have wanted this for decades. So just hold an election, they know what to do.
Yeah. Yes, well, that's all well and good. But what happens the next time?
Right. If Vladimir Putin wants to then go into and take and imprison Zelensky, is that
Well, he's tried to assassinate him.
What do you mean by next? What do you mean by next?
Is it okay for us to do that kind of thing?
Well, my concern is, if it's good for us to do,
correct,
who else are we going to do it to?
Yeah.
How many times?
Are we going to allow this type of
there
thing?
is, and where is the? And listen, there are a lot of bad people, but I also watch this man release really horrible people back into life. I watched him release people who had people killed, thrown out of airplanes, all kinds of stuff.
I do appreciate, though, that he's standing trial in a U.S. court. There was a world in which they would have sent him to Guantanamo Bay.
Yeah, but
he
you
wouldn't
know
have
what?
had the same rights of due process. He should stand for his crimes.
Everybody who's guilty should stand for their crimes. And it should mean that once you've stood for your crime and you've been convicted, you don't get to come. You don't get to come back.
Frankly, he should be standing trial in the international court, and he should be accountable for the crimes against humanity.
That's the other question, is where is the international court?
Yes, the way this is being done is illegal. We should be following the law. This is a country of laws.
Though, guys.
We always
Libya,
say
Iraq,
that.
Afghanistan, Obama, Bush, Trump won, like Biden.
We should be better than this.
And also Greenland, I think you can, Greenland, we're not okay with taking over, okay?